I want to talk about a well-known subject today, faith. Faith. And this is, I'm going to go to Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. And we're going to look through that. Many of the parables, as I've looked at them, are really about the last days. Wow. This particular parable, as I studied it this week, I believe it's a last days parable. It's talking about the last days. So that's very prophetic. So we should be able to glean some things out of this. And I'll read this and I will comment some. But I think these are pretty plain scriptures that everyone knows about. So Luke chapter 18, verse 1. And he, this would be Jesus, and he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought to always pray and not faint. So what should we be doing all the time? Oh my goodness. What did I just talk about? Prayer. What are we going to do tonight? We're going to pray. We're going to meet here at 7 o'clock, and we're going to pray. So you're all invited to come. Even if you're watching locally on YouTube, we'd love to see you here tonight. Men always ought to pray and not to faint. Now, this word faint doesn't mean that you fall over. What it means is don't get weary. If you look that word up in the Greek, this faint really applies to the word weary. So don't get weary when you pray. And I think this is something that could be happening right now as people are praying, they're asking for things, they're not coming yet, and they get weary. They don't faint, they just get weary. They get tired of asking, and they quit. I don't know if anybody out here has had that experience or not. Verse 2, saying, there was in a city a judge which feared not God, neither regarded man. So in other words, this guy is independent of what anybody thinks, including God. Think we got any of that going on today? Maybe so. Verse 3. And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, saying, avenge me of my adversaries. Now that word avenge there, what it means, and in this passage, the word avenge is used a couple of times, but they mean different things. So they are different Greek words, but in English, they translated avenge. In this particular instance, the word avenge means vindicate me and punish those evildoers that have wronged me. So she's asking the judge, I'm right, they're wrong, they need to be punished. That's what this word indicates. Avenge me, and it says, vindicate me and punish my adversaries. I want to read that verse 3 again. And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, that would be the judge, saying, avenge me of my adversaries. Verse 4. And he would not for a while. She was probably a poor lady, didn't have any pull in the city, and so he just kind of ignored her. But afterwards he said within himself, though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continually coming, she weary me. She's wearing him out. So this is kind of indicating, hey, when you're praying for something and it's not coming immediately, what should you do? Stop praying? No, you keep praying for the same thing. Verse 6, and the Lord said, hear that the unjust judge saith. Verse 7, and shall not God avenge his own elect? The things that we are praying for in God's will, he will avenge his elect, which are us, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them. So in this verse, it seems like sometimes it takes a long time for prayer to be answered because he has to bear long with them. You got that? Good. Verse 8, I tell you that he will avenge speedily. Now that seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? And that word avenge there is not the same word as avenge up in verse 3 that we talked about, vindicate and punish. This word means to make or to do. So in other words, what we are praying for in God's will, he's going to do. That's what he's saying here. I tell you that he will make speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, now that would be in the end days, wouldn't it? When he cometh, right? So this is where I'm saying this is a prophetic parable. It's an end times parable. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? There's a question there. Will he find faith on the earth? Before we go into that, I want to talk about the difference in verse 7 and verse 8, because verse 7 says that he will bear long with them. In other words, he's indicating whatever we're praying for may take a long time. But then he says he's going to avenge speedily. So how do you put the two of those together? It seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? But it's not. So in other words, I'll give you a for instance. Let's say I'm praying for the millennial reign of Christ to come, right? And I do pray that. Has it come? No. Why? Because though he bear along with them, in other words, he's bearing along with my prayer. But just like that, one day it will come speedily. Christ will appear. Just like, bam, when nobody thinks he's coming. So that's how you put these two verses together. Sometimes, we pray for things and they don't come. But I think the idea here is that we don't stop. I think that's, what we ought to glean out of this, or part of it. So then the question arises, will he find faith when he returns?